Lissa's best friend, a proud and sharp-tongued noble from one of Elise's most well-to-do houses. She is cold to strangers, particularly commoners, but warms quickly, the most likely to toss in her sleep. Born on April 14th, happy belated, diva. Was it clear that this post was a video teaser? Because I'm not going to Harvard. I mean, I could, if I wanted to.
What, like it's hard?
But going to America right now, not the vibe. Maribelle is a character from Fire Emblem Awakening that I'm honestly pretty ambivalent towards. I like that she wears pink. She's obnoxious, sometimes in a way that I find funny and endearing, and she wants to be a lawyer. I find that part very fascinating. She has a minor recurring role early in the game, but once her main contributions to the plot are over, she disappears from the narrative and exists as a chess piece for battle. I definitely developed an appreciation for her from the support conversations. I think they do a good job of adding dimension to a character that's otherwise pretty one note, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Maribelle first appears in Chapter 2 as a member of Prince Crom's ragtag militia, the Shepherds, and her main personality quirk is her obsession with Crom's sister, Lissa. Maribelle is the daughter of a duke, so she grew up in aristocracy and alongside the royal children. She goes home to Themis for a couple chapters, then joins our party in Chapter 5, and unless she becomes queen by marrying Crom, she doesn't really appear again in the story outside of a couple instances where everyone on the cast gets to speak. To paint with a really broad brush, Awakening is about the war between Elise, where the majority of the cast is from, and neighboring country Plegia. In Maribelle's chapter, she's in the Duchy of Themis. It's the land that her father oversees, and it borders Plegia. I'm trying really hard to keep my back straight this whole video. I played piano and violin for a really long time, and I don't know if it's helping me here. My back hurts, and not in the way that I normally like. Themis borders Plegia. The Plegian army is attacking villages near the border, and Maribelle is taken hostage by King Gangrel, who lies and says that she initiated the conflict. The Shepherds arrive, and they try to negotiate her release, but Gangrel says he'll only do it if Crom gives him the Fire Emblem, which is the magical MacGuffin of this game. Not important to know what it is for this discussion. Of course, Crom says no, and a fight breaks out. Maribelle puts her sharp tongue on full display here. My favorite line of hers is when she yells at Gangrel's right hand, Aversa. Did they not teach you the meaning of the word truth in wretched crone school? Somebody send that to Joanne. I thought it was funny. A young Elysian mage named Rickon also joins this chapter. He's been following the Shepherds in secret because Crom originally told him to stay at the castle, but he catches the enemy by surprise here, and he's able to save Maribelle. The map this chapter is made up of a few hills that have limited pathways to traverse on foot or by horseback. Maribelle and Rickon start separated from the party, so you either have to catch up quickly or send a couple flying units to go rescue them and bring them back to where everyone else is, just because they join as low-level, squishy magic units, so they won't last super long on their own. Maribelle is a troubadour, which in reality describes poets from the Middle Ages who were mostly men, but in Fire Emblem world, troubadours are healers on horseback that are mostly women. After clearing the map and rescuing her, Maribelle doesn't have any more narrative contributions that are specific to her. As a unit, Maribelle is magically oriented, obviously. She has pretty good growths and everything except for strength and defense, which again, tracks pretty standard fare for a magical girl, and the additional movement she gets from being a mounted unit definitely gives her an edge. She can reclass into either mage or Pegasus Knight, which both make sense for her. Mages are the offensive equivalent to healers, and Pegasus Knights are the other women-only class, so Maribelle stays magically feminine either way. Her class access gives her a pretty good skill pool to become either a glass cannon or a more supportive unit because Maribelle can learn a lot of rally skills. Rallies are actions that give nearby ally units stat boosts. Maybe this is why the class is called Troubadour. Like, instead of being a poet to inspire, they can access a bunch of rallies instead. It could also have to do with rhetoric. Troubadours throughout the franchise are often noblewomen, so it could also be an indicator of education, class, and the ability to win an argument. Like, I don't know, a lawyer.
You, however, had time to hide the gun, didn't you, Chutney?
The 3 class lines mentioned each have a more magic-focused option and then a blended physical magic option. Maribelle will not perform well in the blended options. She just isn't going to get there. Troubadour, of course, is her base, and she can go into either Valkyrie or War Cleric. Awakening is part strategy RPG, part dating sim, and its primary gimmick is that units can share a space on the grid and get closer to one another. This deepens the bond between characters, and it's what the franchise is the most famous for at this point. Can we agree in the comments? Get in there. What do you think is more important, gameplay or character writing? I know that's divisive amongst the community, and I'd love the engagement. If you're enjoying this video, subscribe, leave a like. I have a Patreon, I have a coffee. Links in the description below for superfans. The gameplay benefit is that being more sociable can increase your hit, avoid, and critical hit rates. These bonuses have 12 ranks, and if you're moving your army together the whole time, you might be able to hit that 12 without issue. But Valkyrie gets a skill called Dual Support Plus, which gives you 4 of those ranks just for having the skill. So this lets Maribelle and whoever she's partnered with be a little more independent on the battlefield. The other Valkyrie skill is Rally Resistance, which might be the least useful in her kit. There aren't a lot of magic enemies. The utility of Rally Resistance might be a little lower than the others. War Cleric is such a cool idea for a class. It looks so good. And I love that she retains her pink color scheme in the class as opposed to switching to generic good guy blue. It just doesn't do much for her, especially because she sacrifices magical offense and mobility. War Cleric offers Rally Luck, which might be marginally better than Rally Resistance because luck affects accuracy. The other skill is Renewal, which heals 30% HP at the start of every turn. Mage promotes into Sage and Dark Knight. Dark Knight is the least relevant to Maribelle. Life Taker could be useful. It gives you HP after killing an enemy, but for both of the self-healing skills, Maribelle is so frail that you probably shouldn't be letting her get hit anyways, since her defense is going to stay pretty bad. It's probably decent to have one of the skills on her. I would go for Renewal, just so you don't have to have a second healer coming to heal her. Sage is a decent alternative to Valkyrie. They have the same weapon types, tomes, and staves, and the stat spread stays pretty similar. It gives Rally Magic and Tome Fair, which are both great supportive and offensive options. Tome Fair increases her damage when she uses a tome. Rally Magic increases the offensive capabilities of other mages. If you're gonna train up Maribelle to be a combat unit, Tome Fair is pretty essential. Lastly, we have the Pegasus Knight line, which is a core tenet of Awakening discussions. Falcon Knight is probably worse than Dark Knight in terms of performance for Maribelle, but if she's gonna be a rally bot, you can at least get rally speed. Dark Flyer is this game's white whale. It offers rally movement, which is actually really cool because it offers greater mobility, and in a turn-based grid game like this, having extra movement just gives you more command of the battlefield. I forgot that Dark Flyer even gets this because it's so overshadowed by Gale Force. Gale Force lets you take another full action after defeating an enemy, and it's busted. I think its value is a little overstated, especially for a unit like Maribelle who might not be used as a combat unit. On the one hand, she might not need it very often. On the other hand, if you're insistent on using her, if you keep her in Valkyrie, she can go pick off an enemy and then come back to heal somebody. If you want her to be full force magic, I think it'd be cooler to make her a Dark Flyer, just because you get that extra mobility from flight.
Oh, is this low viscosity rayon?
I really like Maribelle's design. I'm quite partial to a Neapolitan color palette, so that really works for me. The exaggerated ringlet curls with anime bangs are everything. Despite being a debutante, her design mostly draws inspiration from 20th century riding outfits, and it's quite masculine. Maribelle might be pink and frilly, but she tucks her pantaloons into her boots and rides astride. It's big dick energy. It also suggests that she's more so dressed for combat than socialite activities, especially with her little leather hip armor. It's not protecting anything. I think in a different game, she'd be wearing a dress and riding side saddle just to be extra dainty, but I'm assuming they didn't want to rig the class models to have to do that. Her concept art hints that they might have wanted to take her full Regency, especially with this decked out bonnet, which I can't imagine being paired with anything but a dress. Maribelle has Awakening's signature belts with heart clasps. I like the riding gloves. The neck ruff suggests that she's nobility. The parasol prop is great. It's very leisurely. They introduce umbrella weapons in the next game as a joke, but it could have been a fierce, unique stave for Maribelle. The last thing I want to highlight is how she's drawn. Walking, mid-speech, flicking her hand as though issuing orders. I read Maribelle being a little bit older than Lissa, probably closer to Crom's age because there's not a huge age gap there, and I think it has a lot to do with how her eyes are drawn. In anime world, bigger eyes tend to mean more innocent, youthful, naive, whereas having more proportionate eyes can indicate maturity, whether that's internal or external. In Maribelle's case, she has these discerning wine red eyes in both her official art and her in-game portrait. That is all to say, I think her artwork effectively communicates who she is, which is why it bothers me so much that she gets moe-fied in her Cypher and Heroes appearances. Half of them just get her eye color wrong. She does not have brown eyes. They're elderberry color, like her favorite tea. And then generally her proportions are just off. Why is her head so big? Awakening's art tends to be really elongated, but in Maribelle's case, she looks pretty proportional, and I find that these interpretations make her look young and cutesy in a way that just isn't aligned with the source material. In Heroes, I get it a little bit more. I'm aware that they have to make all of the women in the game look a certain way to appeal to their main audience so that the $1 million waifu machine keeps milking money. But normally I really enjoy the art from the Cypher cards. I find that they breathe life into these characters in a really beautiful way. So I was disappointed with Maribelle. None of them read as bossy or cunning. Not that women can't contain multitudes, but I think Maribelle's outfit is cute, not her demeanor.
That's great, Paulette. Is this the only interaction you two have ever had?
Sometimes I say okay instead of fine.
Supports have C, B, A, and S rank. The S rank is always the proposal, and then C through A is usually little bits of progression of the same storyline. Some are worse than others, and we're not going to get into depth for all of them. Most of Maribelle's supports bear some similarity. She's a young Karen in the making. She loves to complain. She's a little elitist, but surprisingly not very materialistic. She's a bigger snob when it comes to behavior, not wealth, and she responds well to people who have good work ethics. Teaching etiquette will be a recurring theme. Trying to hire for her house staff will be a recurring theme. Also justice. She wants to be a lawyer. She's from Themis after all, which literally means justice or law in Greek. Her supports with boy and girl Robin are essentially the same. Just if you're a boy, you can propose to Maribelle because Awakening only believes in straight love. They're not that interesting. She's a snob. She's shocked that Robin can read. This is honestly the most arrogant one because she asks Robin about the customs of the unwashed masses from a very distant POV. Maribelle asks Robin to teach her about slang. She doesn't realize that Robin was teaching her like pickup lines and how to flirt, and she teaches Robin good posture. I've established at this point Maribelle is obsessed with Lissa. Maribelle knows Lissa's favorite tea. Lissa tries to guess Maribelle's. Maribelle never says it explicitly, but in a bunch of the other supports, she makes elderberry tea, so one could assume that it's elderberry. I feel like this support is very famous for Maribelle saying that her favorite is black tea with the blood of an adult male grizzly bear. I think it's one of those lines that make a lot of people go, oh, this game is unserious. In the B rank, Maribelle says that she would sacrifice herself for Lissa, and Lissa's like, well, that's how you got taken hostage by Pelagia, right? So maybe let's reevaluate that and cool off. I appreciated this just because in a lot of Fire Emblem supports, they don't acknowledge. I know that happens upon Maribelle's recruitment, so they can refer to it pretty easily, but I just thought it was a nice touch. And then in the A rank, we get some Maribelle tragic backstory. She had a very lonely upbringing, and apparently no one at court liked her. So she feels a certain kinship to Lissa because Lissa was actually willing to talk to her, willing to be friends with her. In her supports with Olivia, Maribelle complains that Olivia is too shy, which doesn't make sense because she's such a confident and daring dancer. Maribelle challenges Olivia to go to town and chat up a noble. Maribelle refers to this as shock therapy, which is not right. If she had said exposure therapy, I'd be with it. But shock therapy is when you zap people, so it's not Not the same thing. In the A rank, they go to town. Olivia meets a man. He buys them both tea and diamond canes. So I guess he was super duper wealthy. And then Maribelle is like, oops, I didn't realize, but all of those things that we were saying, they were pickup lines. And I didn't realize that we were catcalling this gentleman. So similar to Robin's, this is another misunderstanding of slang, misunderstanding of language. We're going to take an extended detour to talk about Crom because Crom is a prince and getting married and having a child is integral to the plot because she needs to be born and there are 5 women in the game that he can marry. The whole marriage pool is like 12-ish guys, 12-ish girls, but Crom can only marry 5. And Maribelle is part of that 5. There's time travel shenanigans, which is why Lucina is the same age as them. All of the women in the marriage pool have a child that's directly associated to them. In Maribelle's case, her son is named Brady. Skill inheritance is a pretty important discussion in this game. Parents can pass down one skill to their children. Part of the reason why Gale Force is important is because it's gender locked to women, but Brady can still get it through Maribelle. Crom's supports are not that awesome. Maribelle vents that she's annoyed that Lissa has a lot of suitors, but she's not very socially discerning, so Lissa might not be able to protect herself very effectively. But then Crom is like, peace and love. My sister can do whatever she wants. If there's a lot of guys trying to get with her, it's her business, which honestly I think is correct. In the A rank, they discuss Maribelle getting taken hostage, and she says the same thing. She would sacrifice herself to protect Lissa at any cost. Then the proposal is pretty Bridgerton-esque because Crom getting married is a canon event. If they aren't married by a certain point in the game, the narrative will just force it for you. So there's a impromptu proposal at the end of chapter 11 where they both talk about being worried about Lissa, and then Crom is like, we should get married. It's like conversation about sister. Oh my god, how is she doing? Is there something here? Actually, yeah. Let's put a ring on it now. That's how Maribelle becomes queen. And then there's a 2-year time skip. They have a daughter named Lucina. Brady, unfortunately, is not a canon event the same way. So baby Lucina is born in present time, and there's a Lucina who's back from the future, but she hasn't revealed her identity. She's going by Marth, the name of the hero king and the protagonist from the original game. Awakening was going to be the last in the franchise, so there's a lot of subtle references that are kind of send-ups to the previous titles. We'll get into that more in a second. In chapter 13, Lucina reveals her identity to Crom, and basically they decide to cut this really dramatic, emotional moment with Maribelle thinking that Crom is cheating on her because he's hugging Lucina. And a lot of like what I'm discussing here, the role of the queen is pretty much the same regardless of who Crom marries. It resolves pretty quickly and Maribelle is excited to have met her daughter. The joke with Brady is that he's essentially the polar opposite of Maribelle. He doesn't speak properly. He lacks etiquette. He's really good at playing the violin. And that's kind of where it starts and finishes in terms of his commitment to gentility. Their conversations involve Maribelle trying to teach him proper diction and elocution. He starts speaking properly and then she's like, actually, I hate this. Talk like yourself. This is really uncomfortable. Now we can get into the other marriage pool men, starting with Frederick. Maribelle asks him to become her new steward because the guy that she currently has hired has gout and is probably going to die soon. And she's like, you really engage in a lot of servant behavior for Crom and Lissa. You lay out their clothes, you make them tea. I think you'd be really good at being a steward. And he's like, well, I'm not a steward. But she's like, but you're behaving like one. So if you want a job, you can come work with me. He says no. And then she gets frustrated. And so she's like, fine, you can just teach me everything and then I'll train my staff. The ensuing conversations are mostly about him teaching Maribelle how to polish silverware and how early to get up in the morning and what normal expectations of a steward should be. With Virion, Maribelle hates that he's a pretty shameless flirt. She basically calls him annoying, and then Virion, I guess, has really severe anxiety about this to the point where he stops eating. And then Maribelle is like, well, I just hunted this boar, so if you want to eat it together, like, you're annoying, but not to the point where you should starve yourself. Like, that's not right. So I guess Maribelle hunts. That's new information. I don't love Vake very much as a character, but the C rank support is pretty funny because Maribelle goes up to him and she goes, Vake, am I a snob? And he goes, I thought you knew. And then she goes, oh my God, it's true. And then she starts crying. And he's like, well, you speak very badly about poor people often. So that's kind of what we expect from you. So they work on that together. Maribelle doesn't like that Vake and Crom gamble and make bets with each other. So Vake teaches her how to gamble. They also end up going to a tavern, and Vake is like, at first, I thought this really wasn't going to go well. I thought people were going to get angry and we were going to have to fight. But after a couple drinks, people seem to really like you. Then in their S rank, Maribelle is teaching Vake how to play chess, and then they propose. The proposal, not as important, but I like that she teaches him chess. With Stahl, Maribelle is having indigestion, so Stahl gives her an antacid. Maribelle's been really tired. She's staying up late. She's working late. She's a singer. She regularly stays up late to study law and court cases. Here, she says she wants to join the royal judiciary. She wants to be a lawyer. The language of what job she actually wants will change in a couple of these supports. Stahl is kind of an average Joe, and he loves a project. So he's like, oh my God, Maribelle, I'm obsessed with you, and we're going to work together towards your dream. He finds some legal documents that she was trying to get her hands on, and then she circles back and she's like, do you have a dream? Like, what's going on with you? And then he explains that he just likes helping people, and Maribelle thinks that's a noble cause. The vibe of her supports with Kellum are quite similar, but instead of indigestion, it's about clothing. She is annoyed that he wears his big suit of armor everywhere. He doesn't take it off. He even wore it to a wedding. Huge faux pas. She buys him some silk clothes, but then he explains that the armor means a lot to him. He was going to quit the army, and then his family sent it. Everyone in the village chipped in. So there's a lot of sentimental value to it, and Maribelle eats that up. Here, Maribelle says that she wants to become a judge advocate, which is a type of military lawyer. She would be the first woman in Elise to practice law. In her S rank, she says that she needs a new valet for her house because Mr. Yates went to prison. So she asks Kellum if he would like to be her valet, and then he's like, actually, my dream is for you to be a lawyer. So it's interesting that it's a similar motivation to Stahl. And then she's like, okay, so you can't be my valet then. We'll have to name you a lesser duke or give you some sort of title for this to work out. Maribelle is mad at Lonku for running ahead because she won't be able to heal him if he gets hurt. Over time, she's becoming increasingly annoyed by his aversion to women. And then Lonku is like, I'll just keep getting stronger so I won't need healing. I'm fine. He's like the definition of men who say that they're working on themselves, but working on themselves means they're going to the gym and no other work is happening. And then Maribelle is like, well, it seems that you have a deeply seated trauma and you're very strong. So I don't really care who you can cut up on the battlefield, because if a woman touches you, you freak out and someone could just kill you really easily that way. So maybe instead of physical strength, we need to work on the mental. Have you ever considered that? And he's like, whoa, no. Maribelle then does exposure therapy, not shock therapy, where they just start spending more time together just across the room from each other so he can get a little more comfortable. In the A rank, she also offers to take him to a brothel just to see if pushing him into the deep end will help. A little mature for Fire Emblem. Obviously, they don't say a brothel, it's just insinuated. Maribelle thanks Rickon for saving her back in Pleacha. Apparently, Rickon is a part of one of Elise's old houses. I didn't know that he was nobility until looking at the support. Maribelle and Rickon were apparently close when they were younger, and then Rickon is like, I'm shocked that you would treat me like a peer because my family is broke. And then Maribelle is like, it's not about the money. In the B rank, Rickon's leg is hurt and Maribelle is like, I'm gonna heal that for you. Why are you walking weird? Rickon says it's just a flesh wound. Crazy to reference a movie from 1975. Maribelle has a really lucid game-breaking moment where she's like, maybe you're a little young to be here. You're a child soldier. And I think that's wrong. And then she's like, I'm gonna go tell Crom, we're gonna get you taken off the battlefield. And then Rickon is like really upset by this because he's like, I have these special powers that no one else has. While I understand your POV, it feels wrong to just sit back and let everyone else do the work when I can also help. In the S rank, Maribelle agrees to marry Rickon and help him restore his house despite his age. Problematic queen. Her support with Gregor is boring. He steals ration and breaks the rules. She doesn't like that. Donald's support is also about her being upset that he broke a rule, but there's a little more substance. So she gives him a legal book and she's like, you need to read this and understand what you did wrong. And he essentially has a photographic memory because she's like, okay, recite this section. And he gets it almost verbatim, which shakes her to her core. Donald is the real Elle Woods of Fire Emblem Awakening because law, easy to him. What? Like it's hard? Maribelle is so pleasantly shocked by his capacity to learn that she's like, okay, I love a project. We're gonna mold you into a gentleman. She teaches him how to dance. There's a little bit of resistance. He feels insecure about the differences in their standing. Just because you farm, it doesn't matter. You're such a hard worker, and I respect you a lot for it. So they get along nicely. With Henry, she discusses her fear not of dying, but of the pain of dying. Maribelle and Libra cross paths while praying in the morning. Libra thanks Maribelle for fending off a pack of drunk guys who mistook Libra for a woman. She's a femme queen. Later, Libra talks with Maribelle about a court case that she's reading about a child who stole from a noble because her parents kicked her out. Libra says, orphan or not, crimes against noble houses are serious, but Maribelle thinks the law would be lighter on a noble and is frustrated by this inequality. She thinks the law should be equally applied to all, regardless of class. Edelgard who? Libra is really impressed that she wants to protect lowborn children, and then in the A rank, Maribelle affirms that she's going to become a minister and she's going to fight for class equality in Elise, but also push it in other countries as well. And then we're saving the best for last, her support with Gaius. Maribelle doesn't want Gaius hanging around her. She doesn't like that he tried to break into the royal treasury twice. I think the second time is when he joins because we recruit Gaius as an enemy. But the first time Gaius tried to steal, apparently he framed Maribelle's father, who almost got executed for it. So she hates him. Later, Gaius thanks Maribelle for saving him on the battlefield. And then she says she only did it because she was rereading the transcripts from her father's trial, and things are not adding up. Because Gaius named Maribelle's father, but he's not really a public figure, it doesn't make sense that you would know him. Someone would have had to give you his name. So were you put up to it? And he says yes, but he doesn't confirm who was being threatened if he didn't comply. He spills the rest of the details about this conspiracy off screen, and then later, once we circle back, Maribelle has sent a letter to her father with Gaius's information. Gaius reveals that he sent a letter shortly after the Duke's trial that saved him from being executed. He also reveals that the person whose life was being threatened wasn't his, wasn't the Duke's, but it was Maribelle's herself, which is a huge slay. I think this is one of the most interesting supports in the game. Most of Awakening's supports are a little bit silly, a little bit vapid, and they're about what the characters are doing in the moment. A lot of them are hinged on an activity to give the characters something to talk about. Not very many of them have lore. So I found her conversations with Gaius to be a lot more engaging.
So you bend and snap.
We're gonna cap off the video talking about DLC maps, but unfortunately, Maribelle's contributions are not that interesting. One of the DLC maps is basically an anime festival episode. The other one is basically an anime beach episode. At the festival, she talks with Lissa and Olivia, women that she already has a connection with. She insults Lissa for wearing a party hat. She gets on Olivia's case for being shy. And then at the beach, Sumia is especially clumsy, and Maribelle is kind of annoyed by that. Sumia is trying to study Maribelle so she can become more confident, and Maribelle is arrogant. So she's like, okay, well, at least you picked a good subject to base your self-improvement on. But then as Sumia walks into a tree, Maribelle is like, she might be beyond saving. And then her other beach chat is with Muriel, and they both talk about how the hot weather and being at the beach causes people to act silly. And then Muriel is like, I have to study beach behavior because she's a woman in STEM. And then Maribelle is like, so you're going to study the beach behavior by going to play on the beach? And Muriel is like, yep. And then she runs off. These convos are not meant to be serious by any means. They're silly, they're fun, they're for the DLC. I liked Muriel's the best just because it's a sillier POV. Lastly, I forgot that Awakening has a few legacy maps that are essentially recreations of maps from older games. Awakening did it first, and then Engage copied it later. In these maps, the spirits of characters throughout the franchise are the enemies. What's interesting is that Awakening's cast has unique dialogue with some of the characters. Olwyn is from Thracia 776. I think her and Maribelle are paired just because they're both magic women on horses. Narcian, she basically just calls a it. But then Micaiah, who's one of the protagonists of Radiant Dawn, Maribelle is kind of able to clock that she's a princess, and I appreciate that they have some discussion together because Micaiah is a light mage and she's one of the more central healers in terms of plot. So I thought she was a cool character to have in conjunction with Maribelle.
Congratulations, class of 2004.
The last thing we're going to talk about is endings. Maribelle's title, how she's known throughout history, allegedly, is Dire Damsel, which is obviously a reference to her being kind of an impatient lady. In endings where she is not married to anybody, she becomes a magistrate and fights for equal applications of the law. This is pretty consistent with her endings where she gets married. There are, of course, slight variations. With Crom, she's a magistrate and also the queen. With Virion, they both go back to Roseanne. With Lon'qu, she goes to Ferox and fights for reform up there. Her family is not fond of Gregor, and neither am I. With Gaius, she's worried that she's gonna have to incriminate him somehow. With Donal, she returns to his village and they do farm work. That one was kind of out of left field because you'd think she would still want to fight for class reform, but I guess she gave it up. That's it. That's all that I have on the Dire Damsel today. Like, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the coffee, check out the Patreon, leave me a tip. I would really appreciate it. But being here is good enough. Who do you want me to talk about next? Who is your favorite character in Awakening? Who is your favorite person to pair Maribelle with? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your comments and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. I'm sitting on the edge of the chair to maintain my posture. I am a good noble and nothing less. But also, okay, it's another day where we need to take a moment to appreciate the look. Everyone needs an assortment of silly blouses, you know what I mean? And I made this. One of the only things I've crocheted. Is it really hot under the ring light? Absolutely. But enjoy it while you've got it, you know what I mean? Just don't zoom in.